Los Angeles never really sleeps. Even at 3 in the morning, there are headlights moving through empty streets, distant sirens, helicopters circling above the city, and the faint glow of Hollywood covering everything in artificial light. But there are places in Los Angeles where the noise suddenly disappears. Places where the city seems to forget you exist. This story is about one of them. In October 2025, a 28-year-old man named Daniel Reed moved into a cheap apartment near an old commercial district in Hollywood. The building was almost 90 years old. It had cracked yellow walls, narrow hallways, rusty fire escapes, and an elevator that made a horrible grinding sound every time it moved. Daniel didn't care. The rent was far below what most apartments in Los Angeles were charging. The landlord only gave him one strange warning. Before handing Daniel the keys, the old man looked directly into his eyes and said, "Whatever you hear after midnight, don't open your front door." Daniel laughed. "Is there a problem with the neighborhood?" The landlord didn't laugh. "No." He paused. "There's a problem with the hallway." Daniel thought it was an old man's attempt at a joke. He moved into apartment 406 that afternoon, and everything seemed normal until the first night. At exactly 2:17 a.m., Daniel woke up. Someone was knocking on his apartment door. 3 slow knocks. Knock, silence. Knock, silence. Knock. Daniel sat up in bed. He checked his phone. 2:17. He waited. Then he heard a woman's voice from the hallway. "Daniel." His body immediately became cold. He didn't know anyone in the building. He quietly walked toward the door. The voice came again. "Daniel, please open the door." It sounded like a young woman. She sounded frightened. Daniel looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. He stepped back. Then the voice whispered, "I know you're looking at me." Daniel froze. He hadn't made a sound. The woman continued, "Please don't leave me outside." Daniel backed away from the door. Then something happened that made his blood run cold. The voice changed. It became his mother's voice. "Daniel." He hadn't heard his mother's voice in years. "Open the door, sweetheart." Daniel immediately grabbed his phone. He called his mother. She answered on the third ring. "Daniel, why are you calling me at this hour?" Daniel couldn't speak, because while his mother was talking on the phone, the same voice was whispering from outside his apartment. "Daniel." The next morning, Daniel told the landlord what happened. The old man didn't look surprised. Instead, he asked, "What time?" 2:17. The landlord lowered his eyes. "Every night?" "I don't know. It happened only once." The old man slowly shook his head. "It always starts with one night." Daniel asked him what was happening. The landlord refused to answer. Instead, he gave Daniel one piece of advice. "If you hear knocking again, don't look through the peephole." "Why?" The landlord stared at him. "Because sometimes—" He swallowed. Whatever is outside isn't standing in front of the door." Daniel didn't understand. He soon would. That evening, Daniel installed a small security camera outside his apartment. He wanted proof. If someone was playing a prank, he would find out. At 2:16 a.m., Daniel sat awake in bed watching the camera feed on his phone. 2:17, nothing. 2:18, nothing. Then, knock. Daniel's heart jumped. The camera showed the hallway. Nobody was there. Another knock. Knock. Still nothing. Then the camera image began to glitch. For a fraction of a second, Daniel saw something standing directly against his apartment door. A woman. Her face was pressed against the wood. Her body was impossibly thin. Her head was tilted at an unnatural angle. Then the image returned to normal. The hallway was empty. Daniel replayed the footage. He slowed it down. There was nothing. Then he noticed something. The woman's reflection was visible in the polished metal elevator doors, but there was no woman standing in the hallway. Daniel watched the footage again. This time he noticed something even worse. The woman wasn't standing outside his door. She was standing inside his apartment. Daniel stopped sleeping. For 3 nights nothing happened. Then on the 4th night he heard someone crying. The sound came from the apartment next door. Apartment 405. Daniel knocked. No answer. He asked the landlord about it the next morning. The landlord's face went pale. Apartment 405 has been empty for 11 years. Daniel stared at him. I heard someone crying. The landlord didn't respond. Daniel looked at the apartment. Its door was covered with old paint. There was no name, no electricity, no furniture, nothing. But that night, Daniel heard crying again. This time a woman whispered his name. Daniel! He put his ear against the wall. The crying stopped. Then came 3 knocks, not from the hallway, from inside apartment 405. Knock, knock, knock. Daniel stepped away. Then he heard a whisper through the wall. He's under you. The next day, Daniel searched the building's records. He discovered something strange. The building originally had 5 floors, but the basement plans showed another level underneath it. A hidden floor. There was no elevator button for it, no staircase, no entrance on the building plans. Daniel confronted the landlord. The old man finally told him the truth. Decades earlier, before the building became apartments, the basement had been used as a private film studio. A fire had destroyed part of it. Several people died, but one woman disappeared. Her name was Evelyn. She had worked there as an actress. After the fire, nobody ever found her body. The landlord said something that Daniel couldn't forget. People say she never left the building. Daniel asked, "Then where is she?" The old man pointed toward the floor. "Below us." That night, Daniel searched the basement. Behind a stack of broken furniture, he found an old metal door. There was no handle, only a small keyhole. Daniel found an old key taped beneath a wooden shelf. He inserted it. The door opened. A staircase descended into darkness. The air smelled like smoke. Daniel turned on his flashlight. At the bottom was a long corridor. Old movie posters covered the walls. Some were so old that the faces had faded. Then Daniel saw something disturbing. Every poster showed the same woman, Evelyn. He walked deeper. At the end of the corridor was an old film projector. It suddenly turned on. Daniel jumped backward. The projector began playing a silent black and white film. It showed the building. Then the camera moved through the hallway. Apartment 406. Daniel watched himself sleeping. He stepped closer. The film showed what happened next. A woman entered his bedroom. She stood beside his bed. She leaned toward him. Then she turned toward the camera. Her face was burned and completely black. Daniel stopped breathing because the woman suddenly looked directly into the camera. Then she smiled. The film changed. White letters appeared on the screen. "She is not outside." Daniel stared at the words. Another line appeared. "She is already inside." Then the projector stopped. Behind Daniel, someone whispered, "Daniel!" He turned around. Nobody was there. Then he heard footsteps running toward him from the darkness. Daniel sprinted toward the stairs. The footsteps followed. He reached the basement door. Something grabbed his ankle. He screamed and kicked free. He ran upstairs and slammed the door behind him. He pushed a heavy cabinet against it. For several minutes there was silence. Then his phone rang. "Unknown number," Daniel answered. A woman's voice whispered, "Why did you leave me downstairs?" Daniel dropped the phone. The voice came again, but this time it wasn't coming from the phone. It was coming from behind him. Daniel slowly turned. His bedroom door was open. A woman stood inside. Her back was facing him. Her hair covered her face. Daniel couldn't move. She slowly turned her head. Not her body, only her head, until she was looking directly at him. Her face looked burned. Her eyes were completely black. Then she whispered, "You opened the door." Daniel shook his head. "No." The woman smiled. "You opened it years ago." Daniel didn't understand. Then she pointed toward the mirror. Daniel looked. His reflection wasn't standing where he was. It was standing behind the woman, and his reflection was smiling. Daniel turned back. The woman was gone. He looked at the mirror again. His reflection slowly raised one finger to its lips, then whispered, "Don't wake her." Daniel heard breathing behind him. He slowly turned around. Someone was lying in his bed. Under the blanket, the shape looked exactly like a human body. Daniel whispered, "Who's there?" The blanket moved. A hand slowly emerged. Then another. Daniel ran. Daniel left the building before sunrise. He never returned. He abandoned everything. His clothes, his furniture, his car, even his phone. The police later found his apartment completely empty. There was no sign of a struggle, no fingerprints, no evidence that anyone had entered. But the landlord found something strange. On Daniel's bedroom wall, written in black ash, were 4 words. "She moved to 405. The landlord immediately sealed the apartment. He refused to rent it again. But 6 months later, a young couple moved into apartment 405. They knew nothing about the building's history. They knew nothing about Evelyn. And they had never heard Daniel's name. On their first night at exactly 2:17 a.m., someone knocked on their door. 3 slow knocks. Knock. Silence. Knock. Silence. Knock. The woman looked at her husband. "Should I see who it is?" Her husband shook his head. "Don't." Then they heard a man's voice from the hallway, a voice they had never heard before. It whispered, "Please open the door." The woman walked toward the peephole. Her husband grabbed her arm. "Don't look." But she had already seen it. Her face turned white. "What?" her husband whispered. "What did you see?" She slowly stepped backward. "Nothing." "What?" "There isn't anyone outside." He looked confused. "Then why are you scared?" The woman pointed toward the door. "Because—" Her voice began to tremble. "The knocking is coming from inside the apartment." And from the bedroom behind them, 3 slow knocks answered. "Knock, knock, knock." Then a woman's voice whispered, "Welcome home." The lights went out, and somewhere beneath the streets of Los Angeles, an old film projector started running again.